Heartset is why we do what we do. It's who we are. It's what we care about. It's what we stand for. Love is all of it. It's accepting the good, the bad, the light, the shadow. And yet how many people, when it comes to self-love, have only ever known a earthly, a worldly, conditional form of love? And if that's all they've experienced, why do they think they wouldn't apply the same conditions to their self? I'll only love myself when I look like this, I feel like this. I guess I'll draw this with one final point. Those in most need of love show it in the most unloving of ways. And I think this is why a lot of men are struggling these days. It's really interesting, because I don't mean to be controversial, but there goes a sight from my soul.
Welcome to the Inspired Evolution. And we have with us today, oh man, this one's for our hearts. Ryan Hartley, how are you there, brother?
Oh, mate, I absolutely love the energy you bring to the start of these podcast episodes. I am good. It's like 8:30 at night here in the UK, and I am good to go, man. I'm going to be a
That's your evening dose of coffee right there.
Yeah, 100%.
Man, for those tuning into Ryan for the first time, let me quickly do the honours, and then we'll dive deep into this conversation. This conversation is going to be about heart-centered leadership. Ryan affectionately calls him, is known as being a husband, a father, but he is also the heart and mind behind Always Better Than Yesterday. And recently, he's been putting together this thing called Akira, a council for wise men to come together as well. So I'm excited to dive deeper into the coaching, the worldwide community, and the podcast that you've got, Always Better Than Yesterday. Mate, thank you so much for doing this and being here with us today. I would love to sort of just step out of kind of today and go back a little bit and go, do you ever look back at who the Ryan Hartley was like before? Because we're talking about our kids before we dived into this, like that, the young Ryan Hartley, and were there always already these sort of seeds and sprinkles of like heart-centered leadership? Like, what did that? Is there a continuum somewhere in your storyline where that was really present for you, even as a kid, or?
Yeah, there absolutely is. But I'd love to say that it was full of love, heart-centered. But one of the biggest things, and I guess this is one of the most important things I had to learn as an adult, is much of what I would do as a kid is come to the world for love rather than from love. You see, I come from a single-parent background. Father left when I was 6 months old, and then stepfather when I was 12. So I've come to realise that I've suffered a lot of abandonment in my life in terms of male role models, and I have an incredible mum. She works several jobs, the epitome of optimism, never complains, never asks for help, and obviously that's part of my strengths and weaknesses. But I never really had that stability of feeling loved, and I don't think I didn't realise that as a kid. I thought I had a good childhood. You don't really know what you don't have as a kid. And I started to grow up, and I was fascinated with psychology. I think being the eldest child as well, just being around adults more, just a curious kid, right? Curious, insatiable curiosity. And coming across this topic of psychology, that was the thing for me. Here I could get all the answers to these human being things. How incredible is that? And, I guess I watched one too many crime documentaries, and I started to develop a real curiosity for why naughty people did naughty things. So I went off to university, studied psychology at uni, and I wanted to be a criminal profiler. But my wife, I've been with my wife since I was 15. She was ready to move out. By the time she was 21, she's like, we need to move out. Now's the time to get some freedom, get a job. Get a job. So I joined my local police service, and I took 999 calls, and I took and I dispatched officers on the radio.
Right.
I guess short story is, throughout my leadership development journey within the police, I come across coaching and I come across leadership, and something really important that really encouraged the heart within my leadership was I became a parent at the exact same time as I became a manager leader for the very first time. So I was doing the 3 a.m. night feeds And I was looking down at this. I mean, no one wants to do 3 a.m. night feeds, right? Like, no one wants to do them. And yet here we are out of love, sacrificing our time, our energy, knowing full well the next day is going to be a write-off because we're going to be tired, hard to concentrate. And yet we're there. We're sat there doing it out of love. And I felt like I was having some similar emotions for my team when I was going to work. I wanted to know that I cared about them. I wanted them to be able to come to a place where they felt inspired to do their best work. And I felt like I wanted to, send them home better for, many of the kids that needed them. And there's multiple kind of avenues that we can go off from here. But I guess to bring it back to this Ryan Hartley as a kid, as he kind of grew and as he became more aware of heart and love and how that expresses itself and becoming more conscious, he realized that, I don't know, I'm talking about myself third person, but I realized that myself as a kid displayed many shadow behaviors that the world had perceived as, say, arrogant. Whereas I can now look back at that young kid and go, of course I was telling everybody all the great things I was doing because I just wanted someone to go, hey dude, I'm proud of you. You're doing good. You're doing all right. And I guess I've really then started to be able to come alongside myself with this compassion. I think compassion means to be with in my suffering. And at first, I think in my growth, I've been able to have compassion from the younger version of myself because he tried too hard. He told too many people about it. And in reality, he was just a young kid who just wanted to be told that he was good, he was doing well, and that he was loved.
Wow, there is so much in there. Thank you so much for unpacking that, bro. And one of the big things is, like you said, the shadows. And I think there's this, you put it so poetically, just there are certain things that we do for love and there's certain things we do from love, and there's quite a delta between those two things. And even just having that awareness and, like you said, you don't really know what you're doing when you're doing it when you're that little as well, it's almost like you get older and you look back and you're like, and I don't know if it sounds like it was similar for you, but I've been running this Inspired Evolution podcast at least for 6 years now, so it's at least 6 years of personal development. There's a whole
that's amazing.
Before
As well,
right?
It's incredible.
But it wasn't until I became a father, that really I started being able to look at what's the right way of articulating it? Almost just the patterns of behavior that are just handed down from generation to generation, and being able to see like, that was just a particular way that I was coded, and literally just seeing it as a code, and going, like exactly what you were describing, like a lot of these things that we do for unmet attention, just these attachment styles that we develop as well amongst each other. And it's just like, hey, I'm here and I'm worthy, and the way that we like live out into the world, just looking for more attention, more acknowledgement, just to be received for who we are. And it comes out in so many weird and wacky ways. You start looking at, just some of even the leaders in the world sometimes, and you're like, man.
That's it. Yeah. And that's where the compassion comes from, because sometimes those in most need of love show it in the most unloving of ways. And, it's just the irony, isn't it? Our inability to express the very needs that we have, and I think when we come from a heart-centered leadership perspective, one of the real things that we have to help people overcome is stress. Under states of stress, I know many of your guests in the past will have talked similar about this, is in terms of the release of cortisol will inhibit the prefrontal cortex, which is our very ability to be conscious, rational, loving human beings, right? So under states of stress, whether that be in leadership or in parenting, because believe it or not, like this parenting gig is pretty stressful from the minute that they wake up to the minute you go to bed. And how can we come to the world as parents and as leaders from our chosen response rather than our chimp response? I think that's the art of heart-centered kind of consciousness, is our ability to choose, more situation appropriate behavior responses. I mean, I don't get it right all the time. Like, I'll be completely honest and transparent. And we were saying off air, like, my kids are old enough now to keep me accountable to being a heart-centered leader, but it's tricky. And it's stress. It's our ability to overcome that stress and replace our chimp response with our chosen response that's going to lead us to delivering kind of higher possibilities.
Yeah, I love that articulation as well between the chimp and the conscious choice, because it's hard sometimes even just to sort of own that, even as a step one. I find sometimes it's just go, actually, I always have a choice. Even that can be a bit of pill to swallow. It's like, It's like I just operate this way. And I found myself saying this a couple of times, even in my relationship. My wife looks at me and like she calls me out. She's like, "Yeah, is that the inspired evolution?" And it's like, this is who I am, and I love myself for who I am. I don't need to change today.
I am a flawed human being, and I'm going to own all of it. Yeah.
And she's like, you do always have a choice, right? And it's like, oh man, damn it, this choice thing. It's like,
well, yeah. And do you know what? Part of the heart. So I interviewed a wonderful guy called Dr. Gordon Neufeld. He wrote a book with Gabor Mate. It's called Hold On to Your Kids. Honestly, mate. I highly recommend any parent listening, check out Hold On to Your Kids. And one of the things that kind of blew my mind in this book is that he says that it's not parents that set the context for the relationship. It's not, I want to be the best parent I can be and therefore I am the parent. What he says is actually that it's the child that sets the context for the parenting relationship, because they either feel safe and secure and that there's an attachment, and then they will give us the authority to be the parent. And I was like, oh man, and like, wow, like, that's I think that's true of leadership and parenting and relationships, is that we only get that authority by making sure that the people in our care feel that care.
Yeah, of course.
And if we've not done that investment, I'll tell you this, I did not receive grace within my relationship and my marriage because I hadn't worked hard at building that kind of care and attachment. There were points in our life where my wife and I were so busy kind of after the second child pursuing business that we kind of grew apart, and we lost that grace. So when that stressful time came, we were looking at each other and assuming that the worst behavior was their character. They were that behavior, rather than now, fortunately, a few years later, coming back to the world knowing that we're trying our best and that actually we can support each other through that process because we've earned this little bubble called grace.
It's a very profound point about, the people that we lead, or, that we're actually chosen by them to lead rather than us choosing ourselves to nominate ourselves as a leader. Well, because I was going to ask you, like, at what point did you, like, obviously you shared, the work situation and becoming a parent and this sort of heart-based leadership sort of coming through for you, but I was going to ask you about how that came to be for you, because it is quite a bold statement for a man from the UK to set out.
Who was in policing.
What's your heartprint, bro?
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and the context is I was in UK policing, so and it just. But so I guess the way I got into it, my gateway was mindset. I was a psychology student, fascinated with the mind. Mindset was doing the rounds within the coaching scene, Carol Dweck's mindset. So it logically made sense that I became a mindset coach. But as I was coaching and I was doing this alongside my day job, I was working with topics of purpose and values and gifts and skills and strengths and vision. And I was like, these things are deeper than intellect, because if they were intellect based, then we'd just live them all the time, right? We would just say I think this, and therefore we would behaviorally manifest or be an expression of those things. It turns out that the majority of organizations who put values on their walls, they don't actually live and breathe them.
Into this.
So there's something deeper going on, and I now have the words for it, because I interviewed a wonderful lady called Dr. Deborah Rosman. She's the CEO of the HeartMath organization. Yeah. She said, isn't it funny how we don't say I love you with all of my mind? And I was like, this is it. There's something deeper than mindset. There's something deeper than intellect. And that's where I start to use the word heartset. For me, heartset is why we do what we do. It's who we are. It's what we care about. It's what we stand for. So I'm starting to articulate my view of leadership being something deeper. I was using the word love at this point. I hadn't really found the words for the heartset yet. But as I become evangelical about this topic, and as I'm sharing it on Instagram, I have senior leaders at the police service sitting around with my social media. And they're like, what does Ryan Hartley know about leadership? And this is the feedback I get given. And I'm like, so this is the really, really important bit. Yeah. Because here I am starting to have courage in sharing my authentic expression with the world. And I was being judged.
Of course.
This is how I know those points in my childhood were so critical, because they came back to haunt me at 28, 29, 30 years old.
Yeah.
Here I was, thought I had healed some stuff, and it turns out I was being invited for some greater expansion in ways of feeling like I didn't matter, feeling like I didn't belong, feeling like I wasn't welcome. And it triggered me massively. And it really revealed a lot about myself that I'm now hugely grateful for that time and that experience, because I've come to realize the depths of why those topics are important, because Ryan Hartley has felt like he isn't loved, that people don't care about him. So I love nothing more than to help people feel that. So I always say that I found my purpose in the easy times when life was good and I was using my gifts and like serving my heart out and people were loving me. I deepened my purpose during the difficult times, during the struggle, because it's in that suffering. There's a wonderful scripture in the Passion Translation of the Bible. It's when Paul pleads to God when he is asking for the thorns in his flesh to be removed. And the Passion Translation of that response from God says, "In your weakness, you will find my full expression." And I've really come to have such peace in that, of all the pain that I've gone through and I've experienced, there's such purpose in that. And it's only through going through that I've really been able to embrace that expression in me and through me to when I bring, I call it heartwork, which is the work that I think I'm born to do, is the work that is on my soul. And I just love to be able to do this in the service of other people. But, policing wasn't really ready for it. And I was talking about things that I believed in my heart, but I wasn't seeing with my eyes. And I had to get to a point where I felt like I had to decide between fitting in and being authentic. I didn't feel like I could do both. I felt like I had to only bring half of myself, the favoured half of myself, the bit that was productive, the bit that was good at their job. I felt that I would only fit in if I brought that, meaning that I didn't truly belong because they didn't feel like they accepted the whole of me.
Whoa. Thank you so much for sharing that, bro. This conversation about the whole self is actually a huge one, and trying to bring your whole self to life as a whole as well, right? Because I think we get so good at, I see it even in just something as basic as, you've touched on a real core wound there with like the work that we do in the world, but even just friends, certain aspects of me show up with certain friends and certain aspects of me show up with other friends. And, it's like, oh, like, am I this guy or am I that guy? And it's like this, actually, you're all of that. And then some more as well, mate. You're the dad as well. And, you're the leader as well. And you're the follower as well. There's always this aspect to us. But one of the things that was really in the rub there that I wanted to sort of espouse, and I guess I'll get there through this line of questioning, but one of the things that was really present as you were sharing is I had this, I was listening to Jocko Willing, and I don't listen to a lot of him, but one of my favorite things that came out of one of these podcasts was courage is this thing that you can't fake, because the minute you go to fake courage, and I'm using this in context of you allowing your like whole heart-centered self to show up and like going, hey, like, I'm going to start putting myself on socials and just saying, this is what I think about leadership. Even if someone turns around and judges me and go, what do you know about leadership? But that courage that you took is like, that, like the minute you start to fake courage, you're actually doing courage. Like courage cannot be faked because courage is having fear and doing it anyway. Right. And it's like watching you do that is, well, who gives a shit what I know about leadership?
Well, I'll expand.
I'm stepping out with courage, like there's fear, and I'm taking action. And this is
100%.
There's a whole thing in there, right?
I'd love to expand on that. It's fear and taking action anyway. I think that's bravery. I think courage is doing that with heart, because if we look at the word cœur in French, the root of the word courage is cœur. Cœur in French means heart. So I think courage is to do it with heart. And you can't fake that. Of course not. There are on occasions when it is overcompensating. And I think a lot of the Western world is creating a sickness of hearts, which means that there's a huge amount of pride, there's a huge amount of desire in one's heart. And I think that is because a lot of the Western world is attacking people with this feeling of lack and inadequacy. But on a general case, if we can come to the world knowing that we lack nothing, we have all that we need, that we can have love and gratitude and appreciation for everything that we get to do in this moment, then we can come to the world with the purity of heart, which is its only single desire is to express itself and to serve other people. When we have all that we need, our natural response, if you've ever read the book Power versus Force by David Hawkins, he'll say that actually our natural capacity as human beings is to be loving, is to serve others. To get there, we just have to surrender and let go of some of those lower vibrational frequency energies.
Therein lies a bit of a rub, doesn't there, between power and force and how we perceive heartset. And this is where I kind of take my hat off to you sort of walking out in the world doing this work, because it can be such a grey area. Because even, well, let me just bring it back to contextually to myself. Like what self-love looks like for me one day is very different from what it looks like for me another day. Like one day it's, like, you know, you take action, go to the gym, do your thing. And another day it's like, hey, your body needs to rest, run a bath. And, you know, there's days where it's like, oh, you're not really loving yourself, you're like copping out of the gym, you know? And it's like, how do you, and that's just like a very simple, small, micro example. Whereas, you know, going out into the world, it's like, you know, I'm bold and I'm empowered and I'm putting my thoughts out there, you know, or am I coming from a wounded place of, hey, this is me seeking more attention from my father that I never got? You know, it's such a landmine to navigate out there. For the audience listening in, and I'm sure you've, you know, through your coaching, can you sort of guide or share with us how we can maybe delineate between those two different states? One, I guess I've got the intention of wholeness and sort of pretense kind of in my head, but maybe there's more to it than what you're describing.
Well, there's this underlying belief that self-care is selfish, or at least a lot of the narrative is, hey, self-care is not selfish. And I prefer to use the word self-fullness. And when we have an awareness of our needs, when we have an intimate understanding of who we are and what we need, when we then start to give ourselves permission to give ourselves that, we can then come to the world needing nothing. This is the state that I hope all people can come to, is I can come to the world lacking nothing. I have all that I need, I lack nothing is the most powerful heart set affirmation I can give anyone. And I'll give you an example. A couple of months ago, we ordered pizza. And my daughter, she's 7, she becomes really, really feral when she's hungry, right? And I said, can I have a piece of your pizza? She's like swatting hands away. No. Anyway, she eats majority of the pizza and there's some left. And she's like, here you go, Dad, have some pizza. She gave that piece of pizza. It's the same pizza, right? It's one slice. But because she'd given to herself first and because she had all that she needed, she no longer felt like she lacked in any way. She was not fearful of losing what she didn't already want or need. She was able to give to me out of the joyful spirit of her heart. And I received that with so much more heart, because I could see in all of her being how happy she was to give me this piece. If we rewound and I forced her to give me that piece, out of, you know, it would have been resentful. It's like, fine, have it. And it wouldn't have been such a nice interaction. I guess that's a very, very simple way to help articulate and visualize the difference in our spirit when we feel that we have all that we need. When I come back to the power versus force stuff, we are naturally giving. We are naturally serving. Once we can serve from the overflow, we don't have to fear that what's mine is, because the gift is giving. The reason it's called a gift is because we're to give it away. And I think that becomes increasingly hard when we feel like we don't have all that we need. And there's two things for people to really check into. Is that real? Like, is there a sense where I genuinely lack something in some way? Because that's probably our basic needs. Maybe I need to rest, maybe I need to recover, maybe I need some inspiration, maybe I need to spend some good time with friends, or maybe not with any, you know, not see another human being, go up the mountains. Because then I can get to doing that. The other one is, am I being made to think that I lack in some way? And Johan Hari wrote an incredible book called Lost Connections. And in that book, he interviewed a marketing executive. And that marketing executive said, our marketing is at its most effective when people are left to feel inadequate without the product. Now, when we take a step back and we become really conscious about all the information we receive, whether that be from the news, whether that be from marketing and advertising, everything is to evoke an emotion within us. And I tell you what, it's not usually a good emotion. It's one that's making us fearful or inadequate. Yeah. Why? Because that makes us easier to control and for us to be sold to. I guess I'll draw this with one final point. You interviewed Dr. John DeMartini recently, and he said something that blew my brain. He said that love is the synthesis of thesis and antithesis. And it took me a few moments to think, what is this guy even talking about? What he's saying is that love is all of it. It's accepting the good, the bad, the light, the shadow. And yet how many people, when it comes to self-love, have only ever known a earthly, a worldly, conditional form of love? And if that's all they've experienced, why do they think they wouldn't apply the same conditions to their self? I'll only love myself when I look like this, I feel like this. And I think this is where I have to look to a higher power. And this is where my healing came. You know, there was no way I thought I'd be talking about God and Jesus on a podcast, because I was a man of science. There was no room for faith. I was never going to surrender. You know, particularly another father figure. Yeah, I was a man of intellect, but I was never going to surrender to another father figure. And yet here I am. Something's happened along the way that's transformed me from the inside out. And maybe if you're interested, we could talk about that experience. But for me, something happened in 2019 that I felt healed me, and it wasn't of this world. And for me, I think that is the true source of self-love, is knowing that I am loved. I know whose I am. I know I am loved. I am created, that there's nothing I can do, say anything more in this world that will change how much I already am loved and chosen. That then gives me the freedom to come to this world as an expression of that light, knowing that truth, without needing it from any person or possession in this world.
Wow. Thank you so much for articulating that. And I think the conversation around self-fullness is a really potent awareness as well. I similar to you, end up sort of rolling up my vigilante sleeves after a while when I look at marketing and how capitalism is, how it reacts to us. It's just like being like it's intentionally being made to feel like we're not enough. And I find myself saying this in my coaching, and I'm very conscious when I say this in my coaching, because it's set like of the way it sounds out of context. But I say this thing, which is like, did you ever stand a chance? And I hate saying that, because it does not sound empowering. And, you know, a big part of the inspired evolution is, you got this, you're you, you've always been amazing, let's go, you know? And it's like, double down on your strengths. But there's this, did you ever stand a chance? Because it's, you walk down supermarket aisles, you walk down in like around the cities, people that are tuning in the podcast, you know, you've heard me say this. It's like, I remember when I used to go to work, there was this like billboard of this guy and his like underwear, and this chick in her like underwear, massive billboard, like huge. And I was like, you know, probably within like the 2 kilometer radius of this billboard, there's probably like 5 people that look like that. You know? Right. And it's like, this is the standard of beauty. You know, that you like are now like, if you either look like this or, you know, you're not worthy. And it's like, dude, no, like that's not true.
And do you know what? And I really love the fact that you say the words, did you ever stand a chance? Because I'm an optimist at heart, and I don't see that as defeatist. I see that as really compassionate, because we live in a world now that looks at the level of the individual, you know, self-love, self-care. So if I am not well, if I am suffering, then I have been taught and conditioned to look at self being the cause. And what that's really cleverly done is it's pushed away the attention from all the big forces at play that says, hey, well, you know, this is an individual responsibility. Whereas that, did you ever stand a chance? Think, you know, again, with Johan Hari's latest book, Stolen Focus, the amount of money that's gone in to these tech companies to hijacking. Work, you know, absolutely, to get, to literally exploit our own human vulnerabilities, and it's done without us even knowing. So I completely agree with you. Did you ever stand a chance? I think that's such a compassionate way to human beings that actually, with the best will and intention in the world, there's so much budget and human powering robots trying to exploit that, and I that is the antithesis of what it means to lead people with love.
Yeah. As you articulate, I'd love to find out more about what happened to you in 2019 as you shared that journey of this connection and this healing, because I found it's a very interesting relationship that we share with ourselves through our own beliefs.
Yeah.
And being someone that, is well, myself and yourself included, I guess, is like this coaching space, there is, we can install beliefs, we can uninstall beliefs, but then I've recently, and maybe there's another way to language this, but I've come to this sort of resting that beliefs can be subbed in and subbed out for sure. But then there are certain elements, and I've noticed this from trajectories where I've coached certain people and spoken to other people on the podcast. There's this thing called knowing, which I've started calling it knowing, which is very different to a belief. It's like this deep inner knowing. You can't explain why you have that belief, but it's this, and it's knowing. And I don't know what else to call it, but it runs deeper than a belief. And because I've had moments intellectually where I've believed in God, and been moments actually where I've intellectually not believed in God, believed in source and not believed in source. But then there is this, when I tune in, there's like this inner knowing that actually this whole thing is more than a miracle. Like, what is going on here? There is more to it. And there's just a knowing that's pretty remarkable. And I've had to learn to just sort of settle into something like that,
Well, I had to surrender the need to know, the need to have it all figured out. And actually, and I guess, for me, I was fortunate enough to have had a heart experience that the mind could never make sense of, because intellectually I'd never have got to a point where I was voting for any big man on a throne with a beard. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just wasn't going to happen. I thought that, becoming a man of faith would make me like Ned Flanders. And like, that was the last thing I wanted to do. Do you know what I mean? Like, not even a chance. But I guess to set the context for 2019, I guess I went into 2019 with a bit more love for self. I really started to make a big difference with Always Better Than Yesterday. I was, I was supremely confident in my day job. I was working far above my pay grade because I was hoping for, the next thing, the next promotion. So I was working so hard to do that. 2019 was characterized by me working so hard, trying to make stuff happen, and then the universe revealing to me that none of it was in my control anyway. My health started to deteriorate. The position at the police never became available. No matter how hard I worked, that post didn't become available. So I got glass ceilinged from the path where I was, and my marriage started to break down. So every area of my life didn't feel safe. Every area of my life,
that is so stressful.
Apart from the community that Ryan Hartley had built, where he felt loved and validated. And my love language is the words of affirmation. And it's safe to say I was getting lots of words of affirmation from the community who were loving how I was showing up and serving them, which meant that I went there rather than, to fix the problems in other areas of my life. And that could only go on for so long until things kind of had to come to a head. And, my wife and I, we had some stuff to figure out. We had to work out whether we continue or we stop. And I unfortunately ran out of hope. And I guess the downfall, and this is probably the first time I'm using these words to articulate this, but I guess I got to a point where I felt love for self, that I had an expectation that others around me matched me at that love for me. And I guess conditionally I applied that and I didn't receive it. And that only led to further suffering, self-imposed suffering. Because what I would do now in that same situation is understand that I'm still doing that for love. How can I be of love? How can I come from love? And how can I put myself to one side? I thought I'd got to this point of embodying love, and I hadn't. I got to this notion of I guess it was protecting this belief that I was worthy of love. It was still fragile to the forces around me. It was still, I guess, prideful, you know, because I was still vulnerable to it not being present from the ones who I dearly wanted it from. But during the struggle, my wife found faith. My wife found God, and she's like, hey, you need to read this. I'm like, not a chance. Not a chance. Not a chance. But in our recommitment to each other, I agreed to go to this Christian festival. Man, what an experience that was. You know, it was modern. I've never heard modern Christian music. I've been in churches in England. They're like pointy buildings, little rows of seats, you know, generally old white people that say peace be with you at the end. I thought, this isn't for me. I'm not one of these people. And yet I go to this festival. It's all walks of life, all ages, having these intimate moments of worship. And I'm like, oh, I'm curious because I'm a people watcher. So I'm like watching. And then some of the lyrics start to speak to you. God moves in funny ways. He starts speaking lyrics to me. So then I would like listen to some worship music in my car on the way home from work without telling my wife. This is like, and I'd come out, I'd be in tears on the driveway going, I'm a child of God. Like, but, you know, the day that happened, I was in church. I'd agreed to go to this local church with my wife, and it was Father's Day, and I hadn't, you know, taken up faith at this point. And the pastor said, "That's it, man. Come down the front. It's Father's Day. We're going to say some nice words. We'll do a commissioning." I was like, "Oh, what's the worst that can happen? You know, I'm a dad. He'll say some nice things, you know." So I walked at the front, and he said, "That's it, women. If you want to put your hands out towards these men, you do that." And it was like she Hadoukened me in my spine. It was like a fireball to the bottom of my spine. My whole body caught fire. My eyes just streamed. And I just walked back to my wife and I said, I don't want to talk about this ever again. I said, but I feel like a child of God. And since then, you know, I've tried to kind of walk this path of surrender with that inner knowing that there is a God. That that for me, I understand and I choose to accept Jesus as my king. But because I haven't grown up in a church, I am absolutely loving learning about God through people, through other fractals of his creation, through the likes of Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza, through the Tao Te Ching. So I have absolute faith that Jesus is my king, but I feel so free that I can learn about faith in God and its fullest expression in anywhere I look, because I believe that God is in all and through all.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Ro.
Yeah, thank you.
There's a lot that inner knowing gives you that cannot be quantified as you're walking your path, though, right? Especially when you like almost bring it back full circle. When you mentioned earlier on in the podcast your relationship, you know, in the parable that you shared about the thorns and the weakness. Just I find myself, you know, even as a coach, sometimes it's just holding someone's hand through a difficult time, you know. Just having that inner knowing, it can be light and day how you navigate the challenges specifically. Obviously the joys, you know, we navigate with quite a bit of grace generally, but especially the challenges, right?
Well, it's really interesting you say that, because I'm just reading it at the moment. It's in the Gospel of Mary, which is one of the really beautiful texts. It really does capture the feminine. And, you know, when we're talking about being a whole human, that's about integrating the masculine and the feminine within us so that we can come to the world fully whole. And I think, you know, many men have been conditioned out of their feminine. They've been conditioned out of their feelings and their vulnerability. So they're not able to meet them. They're not able to meet other people because they've not met themselves at that depth. They can only meet other people to the depths of which they've met themselves. And I just love the fact that you've just said there about being compassionate and being and able to hold a hand, because that says to me something about you as a human being who has integrated this masculine and feminine to be, and it just shows what is possible for a human man when he does integrate both that masculine and feminine energy. Because one of the things in the Gospel of Mary, it says that the men were not present during Jesus' crucifixion. Why? Because they can't deal with the emotion. They can't, if the masculine is at its best when it's fixing problems and solving things, emotions aren't things to be solved. Emotions aren't things to be fixed. So it creates discomfort inside our spirit if a masculine energy comes to a feminine problem. And I think this is why a lot of men are struggling these days, is because they're applying that logical, rational problem solving to their emotions. And that's never going to
work.
It's never going to work. And because emotions are feedback mechanisms, emotions are data, they're things to tune into and learn, not to fix and solve. And when a man then concludes that he can't fix his emotions, the conclusion then that he is the broken one.
It's a very huge topic. And yeah, one of the things I see again and again in the men that I coach, especially, I try my hardest not to do relationship coaching just because I find one person is already such an interesting, body of work to work on, let alone when there's another person in the equation. And then when two people come together, there's a relationship, there's a third entity forms, and you're like, what am I even coaching? It could be such a body of work. I'm sure you can appreciate. But there's this real, and this is, like you said, I think it's more appropriate to use the word masculine rather than men. But the masculine approach to try and consistently search for the signal through the noise of emotions. And it's like the masculine approach is like, okay, what's the signal in all of this noise? How do I get to the root of it? And it's like, actually, this is just music, and it's just going to play out, and you just got to just wait. And then at the end, just, and but it can be so confronting. I'm going to listen to this whole piece play out, like, it's bringing stuff up for me. It's like, hey, bro, just know that it's going to end. It's like it's all part of it.
It's so hard.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say it segues into a little bit of Akira. Tell us a little bit about Akira. So maybe you can pick up what you were about to say, and then tell us about Akira.
Thank you.
Why you set up a council for wise men, and what that really means to you, what you're doing there.
Yeah, I mean, I've come to realise that I probably had to grow in my masculinity. I was certainly more in touch with my feminine, I guess, growing up with a mum. I guess maybe that's why I'm able to have such empathy and compassion within my coaching, because of that upbringing. And for me, I've had to learn more the masculine side of things. And, I always felt less of a man, shall we say, because I've never been very good with my hands, in terms of DIY and with cars and things like that. Yep. So for me, a lot of the last kind of 5 to 10 years has been about what does it mean to embody healthy masculinity? Because there's so much talk about toxic masculinity, and I've just really come to just love and appreciate like pure divine masculine, one that's honorable, that's noble, that's willing to lay down its life for those that he loves. And I guess there's something beautiful about a man that is connected with his heart, because he becomes those things. He becomes, and this is what I wasn't doing in my relationship. I wasn't humble enough to serve. I got to this point where I was like, I am deserving of love. Why don't you love me? Well, I had to become someone lovable, and and having to face that was probably too much for me at that time to have that realization. You're not loved, mate, because you're not behaving lovable. So for me, it's come through my own journey around what it means to kind of lead with a healthy masculine. And, I guess over the journey of the last 5 years with Always Better Than Yesterday, 80-90% of the people that join my coaching have been women, which have been great. I absolutely have a heart for women and equipping them with heartset and confidence. But there's always been something there for the men that I just knew that they needed some space to come to connect. And I guess I've had to journey in my own leadership around, getting back to the gym, reconditioning myself to do what's difficult, to be able to delay gratification, to be able to cut forces out of my life that are attacking my soul and my spirit, shall we say, to reduce alcohol, to prioritize sleep, to be the best father I can be. I do cold water therapy and breath work. And so for me, I've worked on developing a healthy masculine within myself so that I can be the man that people in my life really truly need me to be, which is honorable, noble, and servant, a servant's heart. And I guess I've got to a point now where I believe that I can hold a space for other men who are seeking to grow and develop in a similar way. And I've learned, I've interviewed a wonderful guy called Dr. John Gray, who wrote the book Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And one of the things that he kind of said to me, which really did kind of empower me, is that the controversial statement is that men do not need to talk more. there's a whole narrative in the men's mental health spaces that men need to talk, get men to talk. And he says, no, they don't. Like, men just need to realise that emotions come and go, and they need to go and spend more time with men. They spend so much time at work, they spend so much time in their family, they need to spend time in the presence of other men. So they will all realise that they've all got shit going on. They've all got stuff that's tricky and challenging. Spend time with your mates. They'll probably come up with a solution that might help you. And before you know it, the emotion has come and it's gone. Caveat, if there are some significant problems in your life that and the emotion keeps repeating, well, then there's probably something in the goldfish bowl that needs addressing. There's no amount of hanging with your mates or taking tablets that's ever going to fix a root problem. And that's always the caveat. But majority of time, it comes back to that not seeing your emotions as problems kind of topic, allowing them to come and them to go. So to answer your question in the long roundabout way is that I think, Proverbs 27 says that a wise man, a man with wise counsel succeeds. And I think that's it. If I can wrap around Amrit with 10 to 15 other good men doing wonderful things in the world, seeking to walk the path of wisdom together, then as iron sharpens iron, so man will sharpen man, and we will all grow. And sometimes that will sound like support, and sometimes that will sound like, hey bro, have you tried this, have you done that, or maybe, hey, I can help you with this. And sometimes that will say, like, dude, you are destined for greater things than what you're doing right now. There are things that you're capable of doing that you're not doing, and you're not bringing it to the world. Why not? And I think that is the fine balance, and I call it love tough, which is that actually, do you know what? I'm going to surround you with people that love you. And in loving you, they earn the right to kick your ass and call you higher.
I love that. I think there's a real interesting space here as well, because I think I've been watching and noticing, especially in the coaching space, more and more men generally stepping out to sort of say, hey, we need like men's groups and men's gatherings and, this opportunity. And for a while there, I had this aversion to it because one of my highest values is connection. And then when I start seeing something, and this is just on the surface, right? When you start seeing men and then you see women and you're like, oh, that's like separation, not connection, Yes. And so that was like on face value. I feel you. And then it wasn't until a very dear brother of mine actually started running like a men's group, and he was like, come, and I was like, I'm not for this men's thing,
Yeah.
But we went, and it's been incredible, and we've run I think 6 different retreats in this space now on it. And it's been profound, to say the least, on just how much, like you said, we don't even necessarily need to talk. It's just being around each other in each other's fun, and just how much that is just great. It's really, really, it's restabilizing. And a lot of and I think this is probably where I wanted to bring the podcast home to with you today, is when I look at what actually happens, it's, in some instances 14 men, and you describe 15, and just what's available when your psychology can actually just sort of sink back to something that is primitively comfortable, almost, is the way I would like to articulate it. If I was out and I was part of a tribe, I wouldn't have been, hunting on my own, because that is like, I'm just a human with this like little, like 2 arms, 2 legs. Maybe I can run for quite a bit, but I'm not sure how much more I can really achieve in terms of hunting. I could pick some berries. That'll only keep us going for so long, right? But if we ultimately try and get out there and, like a human's ability to communicate and coordinate with each other, and me just being able to communicate and say, hey, don't go to the river at 5 o'clock or, after sundown because lions hang out there. That's what extended our species, right? So that ability to just be amongst 15 other men and just go, or 14 other men, and just go, and actually I can be held all of a sudden. And I think it bleeds back to that point that you shared earlier. It's like, a lot of times in today's world, it's like, I've got the choice, I've got the responsibility, I can change, I can be better, I'm inspired evolution, I, and like even the pressure from outside is like, if this isn't working for you, what's about you, what can you do, what choices can you make, and it's all this like insulation, whereas just sinking back into like, actually, I can be like, whoa, there's a brother here that actually just went out of his way to go get me a glass of water, or, you know, I can see that brother's going through something. I'm going to pick up a guitar, play a song, you know, help him sort of just make it through this moment, you know, and we just sort of navigate holding each other through the space. And yeah, the only way I can articulate it is this restful respite that you get in this real primitive psychological space in your brain, which is like, oh yeah, I'm connected to other men.
Well, it's really interesting because I don't mean to be controversial, and I'm kind of thinking as we're speaking, so hopefully there's some grace for this. But when we look at John Gray talks about there are 12 love needs, and we as men and women, masculine and feminine, we have all of them, but they're slightly ordered differently when it comes to men and women. And one of the top needs from love for women is to feel safe. And isn't it paradoxical that for men to feel unconditionally loved and held and to express their emotions, the byproduct of that is that the woman will feel unsafe? Because in that moment, she doesn't have certainty whether he's going to be able to support and provide. He's having a breakdown. And that might be some of the barriers as to, you know, subconscious barriers as to why men keep it all in, because that in some way provides kind of these spidey senses that all is not well right now. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to provide. I don't know if I'm going to be able to protect. And that threatens the very essence of her feeling loved or feeling safe. So I think the men's space specifically is a great way of being able to do that for men. Why? So that when they come back to that relationship with their partner, they can be who she needs him to be.
And I think that's a real tenet of the men's spaces that I've fallen in love with, is the whole intention is really to be better men for the feminine.
100%.
You know?
100%. And I love the masculine element here, because and here's the really wonderful thing. I think John Gray says that men don't resist being changed, they resist being unloved. And a man needs to feel loved for who he is right now in this moment. And yet I know so many women out there can see his potential and see how great he could become, and they're just trying to bring that better version. But actually that feels unloving, because it's not loving who he is in this moment. It's wishing he would change and improve. That's what men resist. If a man feels love for who he is in this moment, he will choose to improve himself. He will choose to give you a better man, a better husband, a better father. And I guess that's where I'd kind of like come back to your bit of coaching relationships. I have experience of coaching some relationships. And the essence that I get to is exactly what we're talking about, is we work at the level of the individual. How can we help bring some awareness and appreciation of the gifts and skills and the talents and the contributions that we can make in the service of each other? The yin, the yang, they go together. The beautiful integration of, this is my value, I bring it in service of you. And if we both do that, we're not looking at what we can gain, we're looking at what we can give.
Ryan, mate, thank you so much, man. These are not easy. I think they're very important topics, the ones that you continuously, I would say, garden almost. I see you as someone that's nurturing this wisdom and actually walking it out into life and helping others evolve into it. And it's not for the faint of heart, which is probably a bit poetic to put it that way. But the work that you're continuously doing with, your heartprint, and now I'm excited for what Akira is bringing, but really just, your heart-centered leadership, mate, there's a lot in there, and there's some significant depths that you've plumbed as well. And I think just the reservoir that affords just people to come back home to self-fullness and, that love that's available to them. It really is a gift. So I just want to thank you for having this conversation with us today.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, man. Thank you so much.
For those that want to tune into your work, what's the easiest place for them to find out more about what's going on in the world of Ryan Hartley?
The easiest place is the website. It's 4 letters. It's abty.co.uk. abty.co.uk. It's got all the information there about who we are, the community that we come and be part of our community if you want to spend some time with some other heart-centered leaders. the podcast links there, say coaching, Akira, that's where all the good links are. Mate, I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for 6 years as well. Like, I just say it as a fellow podcaster, like, that is incredible service. Like, hats off to you, my friend. Like, that is an incredible heartprint. Like, and I just hope that you because here's the thing, you've got to have a lot of faith as a podcaster that what you put out is for the betterment of human beings, right? And every now and again, I hope that one of those waves comes back and washes you over and just refuels you over and over and over again.
Thank you for your blessings and your prayers, brother. It means so much.
Yeah, good man.
Really appreciate it. Inspired Evolution Tribe and audience, as you know, this podcast, this YouTube channel would not be what it is without you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in on the regular. You made it all the way through to the end of an episode. You've done that. I love you for that. Thank you so much. If you have gotten something out of this episode, please do hit the thumbs up. And if you're new around here, there's plenty of conversations like this dropping every Monday. So please do feel free to hit subscribe so I can let you know when a new conversation comes out, and we'll continue to stay in touch. As always, stay inspired. Keep evolving. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, leave us a comment, and if you want to stay in tune for new episodes launching every Monday, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay inspired to evolve.